It was supposed to be just another evening. The streets glistened with rain, city lights reflecting off the puddles like broken glass scattered across the asphalt. Inside a luxury car, wrapped in leather seats that cost more than most people's yearly rent, a woman sat still, her hand resting on the cold metal of the door handle. She had everything people dream of: a name that opened doors, a fortune that silenced worries, and a reputation polished by charity galas and red carpet events. But when her eyes caught sight of a boy, barely 12, shivering under the merciless downpour, clutching two infants who screamed against the roar of thunder, something inside her cracked. Their clothes were soaked through, their small faces pale, and in that instant, time seemed to hold its breath. She thought her wealth had bought her every comfort, until this one moment shattered everything. But how did it come to this? What story lay hidden behind those tear-streaked faces and fragile cries? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, lean closer. Because what she was about to discover was not just about a boy in the rain, it was about a truth that would challenge everything she believed about love, loss, and the meaning of family. Her name was Cassandra Monroe. To the world, she was the picture of success, the woman whose signature could sway boardrooms, whose arrival at a charity ball turned every head. Her mansion overlooked the city skyline, its glass walls catching the sunrise each morning as if the heavens themselves were designed to honor her. Inside, shelves were lined with books she never read, wardrobes bursting with gowns tailored in Paris, shoes stacked in neat rows like silent trophies of a life most could never imagine. The air inside her home always carried the faint scent of roses, yet beneath the fragrance lingered something else: emptiness. Neighbors admired her, business partners respected her, the press praised her elegance. But those closest to her, what few there were, whispered that her wealth had built walls higher than her mansion's gates. Cassandra had been widowed young, left with riches but no children, and over the years she learned to mask her grief with perfect posture and polite smiles. She gave generously to charities, wrote checks that built schools and hospitals, but when she returned to her cavernous home, silence greeted her louder than applause ever could. On the surface, she seemed untouchable, a woman who had everything. Yet Cassandra carried a wound no one could see. It was a wound carved deep into her heart years ago, a wound that never healed, though she buried it beneath fine jewelry and polished speeches. And on that storm-soaked night, as she stared at the boy in the rain clutching two fragile lives, that hidden wound was about to be torn open in a way she could never have imagined. The night that would change everything did not begin with thunder. It began with routine. Cassandra's mornings were carefully timed, her afternoons filled with back-to-back meetings, her evenings reserved for dinners that blended business with social performance. Every minute of her life seemed to be scheduled, every detail polished to perfection. That day was no different. Her driver pulled the sleek black sedan out of the Monroe estate precisely at 6, the rain already tapping at the windshield like impatient fingers. As they merged onto the highway, her phone buzzed relentlessly with messages. A board meeting in Singapore had gone off course. A merger she had spent months securing was now at risk. Cassandra's eyes stayed glued to the screen, her mind weaving through numbers and names, her polished nails tapping impatiently against the device. The driver, an older man who had worked for her late husband before her, cleared his throat gently. "Ma'am, traffic ahead is building fast. I suggest we take the river road. Less crowded, though the storm may be worse there." Cassandra gave a distracted nod, hardly listening. To her, the rain was nothing more than an inconvenience, a blur on the glass. She had no idea it was leading her to a moment she could never undo. The storm grew heavier as they turned onto the narrow road. Wipers struggled against sheets of water, and the city lights dimmed into shadows. Cassandra's phone chimed again, another crisis demanding her attention. Her chest tightened with stress, her thoughts far from the road ahead. And yet, fate has a way of slipping through the cracks of ordinary days. A red light flickered just ahead, and as the car slowed to a halt, Cassandra lifted her eyes for the first time in miles. There, on the median strip between rushing lanes of traffic, stood a boy no older than 12. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his thin arms wrapped tightly around two babies who wailed in the storm. Their clothes clung to their tiny bodies, water dripping down their cheeks like rivers of sorrow. The driver shifted uncomfortably. "Ignore it, ma'am," he muttered. "These streets are full of tricks. Children trained to beg, to make the rich feel guilty." For a moment, Cassandra almost believed him. It was easier to dismiss it as another scheme, easier to look away and bury herself back in her world of profits and loss. But then, as her gaze lingered, she noticed something. One of the infants, barely more than a year old, lifted its head just enough for their eyes to meet. And in that split second, through the blur of rain and glass, Cassandra saw something she could not explain. It wasn't just fear. It wasn't just hunger. It was something hauntingly familiar, something buried deep within her own forgotten past. Her breath caught. The driver tapped the wheel impatiently, waiting for the light to change. Cassandra leaned forward, her heart suddenly racing. She could not look away. The driver hesitated when Cassandra told him to stop. "Ma'am, it's pouring. You'll catch your death out there," he warned. But her voice was firm, sharper than he had heard in years. "Stop the car." Tires splashed against the soaked pavement as the sedan eased onto the shoulder. Before the driver could protest again, Cassandra pushed the door open, and the storm swallowed her whole. The rain was icy against her skin, drenching her hair, clinging to her designer coat, as if the world itself wanted to strip her of every layer of comfort. She crossed the street carefully, horns blaring, headlights cutting through the downpour. And there he was, a boy with trembling hands and a look far too old for his young face. She lowered her voice, steady but commanding. "What's your name?" His lips quivered before he answered. "Toby. I'm 13. Cassandra glanced at the two babies pressed against his chest, both crying so hard their tiny lungs wheezed. She frowned. "And them? Who do they belong to?" The boy hesitated, then lifted his chin with fragile defiance. "They're mine." Cassandra blinked. 13 years old, barely a teenager, yet claiming these children as his own. She almost scoffed. Surely this was another street trick, a desperate attempt to play on pity. But something in his voice made her pause. His arms tightened protectively around the infants, his eyes darting away as if afraid she might try to take them. She pressed further. "You expect me to believe that?" Toby swallowed hard, rain streaking down his face like tears. "I'm telling the truth." For a moment, Cassandra was ready to dismiss it. But then, it happened. One of the babies coughed, weak and rasping, and turned toward her. In that fragile gaze, Cassandra froze. Hazel eyes, so bright, so piercing. They were the very same eyes she had once looked into every morning beside her late husband. The memory struck her like lightning, stealing the air from her lungs. She whispered to herself, almost trembling, "Their eyes, those hazel eyes, I haven't seen them since him." Could this boy and these babies be connected to her past? Or was it just her imagination? Another cough snapped her back. The infants were struggling to breathe, their tiny chests rising and falling with alarming effort. Cassandra felt her heartbeat quicken with urgency. The storm no longer mattered. The luxury car waiting across the street no longer mattered. "These children need help," she said firmly. "Tell me, who is their mother?" But Toby's eyes darted away, his jaw tightening. "Please don't ask me that," he muttered, rocking the babies gently as if the question itself was a danger. Her suspicion deepened. Why avoid the simplest question? Why protect a secret at the cost of these children's lives? Every second in the storm sharpened her unease. She stepped closer, searching the boy's face, his eyes, his fear. There was something he wasn't saying, something heavy enough to weigh down a 13-year-old until he looked like a man twice his age. The baby's coughing grew harsher, each sound stabbing at the silence between them. Cassandra's voice dropped lower, colder. "You're hiding something, Toby, and I need to know what it is." The storm pounded harder as Cassandra signaled for Toby to follow. Reluctantly, the boy stepped off the median, clutching the baby so tightly it seemed he feared the world might tear them away. The sedan door swung open, and Cassandra guided them inside. The warmth of the leather seats wrapped around the shivering children, but the driver's face hardened as he glanced in the rearview mirror. His voice carried both anger and warning. "Madam, these streets are filled with lies. You've been generous before, but this is dangerous." Cassandra ignored him, though the echo of his words lingered. Toby's clothes dripped water onto the pristine interior. His voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the hum of the engine. "My mother, she died when they were born. I've been looking after them ever since." Cassandra's brows furrowed. "And your father?" Silence stretched long before he muttered, "I never knew him." His words sounded rehearsed, but his trembling hand spoke of truths too raw to fabricate. Cassandra's mind wrestled with disbelief. How could a boy barely 13 shoulder such a burden? And yet, why did those hazel eyes strike her heart like a memory she had fought to bury? Her chest tightened with conflict. Logic told her to dismiss them, to trust her driver's caution, to believe this was just another story crafted for sympathy. But something deeper whispered otherwise, an unexplainable pull toward the fragile twins in Toby's arms. Their small faces mirrored a past she thought was gone forever, a past she had locked away behind wealth and silence. The storm outside seemed to roar in agreement, pressing her to a decision she could no longer delay. She thought she was helping beggars in the rain, but the truth was darker than she ever imagined, and though the driver pleaded with her to reconsider, though every instinct told her to remain guarded, Cassandra Monroe made a choice that would defy all reason. With steady resolve, she turned to Toby and the children and said, "You're coming with me." Against every warning, against the weight of suspicion, she ordered the car toward her mansion, unaware that the moment the gates closed behind them, her life would never again be the same. The gates of the Monroe estate creaked open, rain trailing behind as Cassandra's car pulled into the driveway. Inside, the warmth of the mansion contrasted sharply with the storm outside. Staff members hurried forward, their polished shoes clicking against the marble floors, eyes widening at the sight of the soaked boy and the fragile twins in his arms. Cassandra's instructions were firm. Blankets, warm milk, a physician on call immediately. Though whispers rippled through the halls, no one dared to question her directly. Hours later, silence fell as the family doctor delivered his findings. "They're malnourished," he explained gently, "but strong enough to recover with care. They've endured more than most children should, but they'll survive." Relief washed over Cassandra, though her eyes never left the twins. She sat beside their crib, watching their chests rise and fall as sleep finally claimed them. Something about the curve of their faces, the shape of their brows, struck her as painfully familiar. Later that evening, as the storm eased, Cassandra walked past the study where photographs of her late husband's childhood lined the walls. She paused. Her gaze moved from one frame to the next, and then back toward the nursery. Her breath caught. The resemblance was undeniable, the same delicate jawline, the same hazel spark in the eyes. She pressed a trembling hand against the frame of her husband's boyhood portrait, memories flooding back with a force she wasn't prepared for. But what happened next tore through her carefully constructed disbelief. While tucking a blanket over one of the twins, her eyes fell upon a small mark near the child's shoulder blade, a faint crescent-shaped birthmark. Cassandra staggered back. Her husband's family carried the same rare mark, passed down through generations like a hidden seal of bloodline. She had seen it on her husband, on his father, even in faded photographs of ancestors long gone. And now, Here it was, etched into the flesh of a child who should have been a stranger. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, torn between logic and the unexplainable truth unfolding before her eyes. This was no coincidence. This was not random. The connection she feared to acknowledge had taken form in flesh and blood before her. If you're still watching to this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this story. In the days that followed, Cassandra's curiosity hardened into obsession. She ordered quiet background checks, instructing private investigators to trace every thread of the boy's story. The reports that trickled back unsettled her. Toby's mother had once worked briefly at her husband's company. Just a few months, barely long enough to be noticed. Then she vanished from records entirely, as if swallowed by the earth. The coincidence gnawed at Cassandra, scratching at the wound she had buried for years. Whispers inside her mind grew louder with every discovery. Could her late husband, the man she had trusted, mourned, and immortalized, have secretly fathered children she never knew? And if so, were the twins in her mansion flesh of his flesh, bound by a lineage that now lay at her doorstep? Cassandra found herself torn in two. One side wanted to protect the children, to embrace them as a final gift from a life stolen too soon. The other side recoiled, demanding distance, fearing they were nothing but painful reminders of betrayal. Her driver was the first to voice what others only dared to think. "Madam, let them go. They'll ruin your reputation. Already the staff are murmuring." Soon her business partners echoed the same warning. They reminded her that legacy is fragile, that the empire she built could crumble under scandal. To them, Toby and the twins were not children in need. They were shadows threatening to unravel everything Cassandra had built. Yet when she confronted Toby with harder questions, his wide, earnest eyes made her hesitate. Was this boy weaving a story for survival, or was he holding on to truths too heavy for someone his age to carry? Each night she found herself watching the twins sleep, tracing the shape of their faces against the memory of her husband's smile. Logic told her to shut the door, but her heart refused to turn away. Then came the first piece of proof. In an envelope delivered without return address, Cassandra found strange documents, employment records, faded pay stubs, and a photograph of her late husband standing beside a woman she recognized instantly as Toby's mother. The resemblance was undeniable, the evidence damning. She gripped the papers with trembling hands, her chest tightening with betrayal, confusion, and a grief she thought she had buried forever. But the mansion itself was no sanctuary. One evening, as Toby carried water from the kitchen, he froze outside a half-closed door. Inside, two staff whispered sharply, their words like knives. "The boy and those babies don't belong here. She's lost her mind taking them in. If we don't act, they'll destroy her." Toby's hands shook as he backed away, heart pounding, realizing the safety he thought he'd found was only temporary. Someone inside these walls wanted them gone. The storm returned that night, lashing against the mansion's windows as though the sky itself sought to tear the walls down. Thunder rolled deep, each strike echoing Cassandra's turmoil, rattling the fragile balance she had fought to keep. She found Toby in the sitting room, the twins asleep on the couch beside him, their small breaths lost beneath the storm's howl. Cassandra stood rigid for a long moment, then finally asked the question that had clawed at her since the rain-soaked night they first met. "Tell me the truth," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Was it him? Was my husband your father?" The boy's eyes welled instantly, his hands twisting nervously, as if the weight of the world pressed against his chest. Tears slipped down his cheeks as he shook his head. "I don't know," he choked out. "I don't know if he was your husband. My mother, she only told me he was a good man, a man who wanted to protect us. That's all I know." She said it before she died. Cassandra's breath caught, her knees weakening under the flood of grief and confusion. For years she had worn her wealth like armor, her coldness like a mask. Now, in front of a trembling boy and two innocent children, that mask shattered. She reached for the twins, pulling them close against her chest, her tears mingling with the storm outside. In that moment, she realized the truth. No paper, no rumor, no whisper could change. Whether they bore her husband's blood or not, they were children abandoned by the world, and they needed her. In the weeks that followed, Cassandra made a decision that silenced every whisper and defied every warning. With lawyers at her side, she filed for legal guardianship of Toby and the twins. The process was long, marked with resistance and scrutiny, but Cassandra's resolve never wavered. For the first time in years, she wasn't protecting her reputation, her fortune, or her legacy. She was protecting lives. And when the papers were finally signed, when the children were officially hers to care for, Cassandra Monroe felt something she hadn't felt in decades: peace. The mansion that once echoed with silence soon filled with the sound of small footsteps, with laughter echoing through its marble halls. The air no longer smelled of roses and emptiness, but of warm meals, bedtime stories, and new beginnings. Cassandra would still sit by her late husband's photograph at times, wondering what was truth and what was memory, but the ache in her chest had softened. She had discovered something wealth could never buy. For years she believed her fortune defined her. But in the end, it was love, sacrifice, and an unexpected family that gave her life meaning. What would you have done if you were in Cassandra's shoes? Would you have trusted Toby or walked away? Let us know in the comments. And if this story touched you like it did us, hit that like button. It really helps us reach more people. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories every day.